For as average as I am, at least I know I came from the best of 6 million sperm and the hardiest of ovum, or perhaps just the luckiest. My genetics may be faulty, but my biology was sublime, predestined. There are reasons for everything. My mother prayed for a healthy baby, an exceptional baby, and her prayers were answered. I was born healthy and with an astounding exception. I do not remember it, but I can imagine my birth. Probably thought they all liked me. The gasping doctors and the nurse who waved, but she was making the sign of the cross. They did not like me. In fact, they thought I was a demon. You see, I was born fully intact with the exception of genitals. That is to say, I have no penis. Now, I'm not hermaphroditic. I have hair on my chest. Some. But the space between my legs is smooth, like a plastic doll. In 1949, I was the only child in kindergarten whose dolls were anatomically correct. To punish me for being malformed, my mother died in childbirth. I had been named Joseph, although I never knew if it was after my grandfather or after the adopted father of Jesus the Christ. My father, who survived childbirth, he was afraid of what he had created. Because I did not pee like he regretted having a son like me. He presumed I could not hold a bat since I had no balls. He was wrong. Not only can I hold one, but I have killed a man with one. But that was later. Because I did not pee like other children, I was put in a special school for special children with special needs. We were all retarded 6-year-olds. Well, I was not retarded, but I was trying my best. You quickly learn that the loudest child got all of the attention, so I learned to be loud. I was the best at throwing books. I ate more crayons than anyone. My fits were sublime and violent. I had many friends. And the teachers, they had to hold me down, but at least they held me. Secretly, though, I knew I was not like the others. I was a fake. And when I was 13, they caught me reading in a bathroom stall. An idiot who could read, they said. He must be an artist. Or at least an idiot savant. So my father paid to send me to a special school for idiot savants in Paris. The L'École Dominique Girard. We had money, and my father wanted a new wife and a son with balls and bats. I did not fit the bill. So I went to Paris to be an artist. I was Hemingway meets the Elephant Man. The students in my international class were prodigies, one and all with dramatic deformities. Pekka was an albino catatonic from Finland, but put a violin in his twisted hands, and he was a master. Yuta from Ukraine was in a constant state of seizures and fits, until the music started. Then, of course, she would tap dance. There was Tibor from Budapest, who, though limbless, could perform exotic acrobatics by holding on to a rope with his teeth. And then there was Elena. Elena could sing. Hers was the first voice I heard standing in the doorway of the École Dominique Girard with my bags in my sweaty hands. It was the finest finest, sweetest sound I ever heard, even to this day. But she was hideously deformed. She lived only with the aid of an enormous steel machine with great glass doors, and only her head stuck out, pale and wrinkled, hairless. They said her skin was on inside out, and so her insides were fully visible. She was horrible to look at. Why'd they put glass doors in her machine was anyone's guess. I liked her instantly. There were train tracks behind the school, and I would push her silver box out onto the platform, the wheels clicking over the boards and chugging, and clicking over the boards and echoed back 10 times over by the roar of the black metal trains chugging by angrily. They comforted us. One day I asked her how this happened. Was there an accident? Just birth, she said. That was the accident. My mother drank. I reminded her she was very popular at the École Dominique Girard. Her black eyes looked playful. She replied, I have the hottest box in school. All the boys say so. She had a dirty mouth, but only in front of me. We were in love. But our romance, you can believe, was a love clandestine, pristine, and not a lust unwholesome. For I had no phallus, and Elena had no skin. I had no reason to open the hydraulic pressure sealed doors to touch her. No. Ours was an affair of suggestion, glances, whispered endearments. The time I spent by her side was bittersweet. For she, like all the rest, was as divinely gifted as she was deformed, while I was not much of either. To live among idiot savants is to be neither as grotesque nor as amazing as they are. I knew that my attendance at the school was assured only by my father's great endowments. His money, that is. My own inadequacies were inadequate. A penis in terms of artistic merit is worth nothing. The Christians had the right idea when they broke them off the Greek statues. Vainly, I tried to find the talent that I believed lay dormant within me. I had seen the other students wheel up to the pianos, their palsy hands placed on the keys, and they could play with fire and passion. So I put my hands on the keyboard, touched the keys to feel them, to comfort them, then pressed down. I wanted my own missingness to speak in music. There was no music in me. I had written some poetry. It was scattered and reactionary, and my haikus had too many lines. I crept into a dance class on my two horrible good legs. Even the limbless and malformed moved with rhythm and grace. So I positioned myself among them, and I waited for the Holy Spirit to possess my feet. I wanted to have one passionate, orgasmic moment of creativity. But I was possessed by nothing except the urge to kick the beautiful invalids twitching their hearts around me. Passion and orgasms were not my path. Now, if I had no legs or heavy burns, that would be worth something. I was uniformly adequate. Except for one lack of something, I was not deformed enough. I do not produce sperm, and therefore I am unable to produce much of anything else, artistic or biological, that lives and breathes. Always in these times of disappointment, which were inevitable, Elena would take me to the trains and sing for me over the roar of the metal wheels, and I would forget my unwhole self. At least, she said, pointing to the trains, you are not tethered to a track like they are. You get to decide where you'll go and when. But she frowned. She didn't believe it for herself. Wise Elena slumped against the walls of her machine like a turtle squeezed from its shell and met for dead. She was the most cursed and most blessed of us all. Everybody loved her, and I above all the rest. And what's more is she loved me. She told me so. She told me she would love me until the day she died. At 18, we were all set free into the world. The musicians had tuxedos custom made to their misshapen bodies and played with George Solti or the Boston Pops or Moscow. The mathematicians were hired by governments. This was before computers. Genius was still commodity. I remained in France at my father's request. But Elena, her parents took her back to Italy and hid her in their basement, ashamed she might be seen, and her voice was unheard. I wrote to her, begging her to escape, and she wrote, "It would be a crime to show my face. The world that waits for me is a circus, and I will not join it. People would not come to hear me, but to see me. Joseph, don't you understand? People would rather be horrified than pleased. But you are a treasure," I told her. "It is your duty to be shared with the world." And Elena wrote, "I am not a cake to be sliced and served." And I wrote, "Elena, you could nourish the world if you were." And she wrote, "You feed them. I would sooner die, sooner have my machine unplugged than be exploited." And I wrote back, "I have nothing to feed them." I knew how to pay her feelings. She stopped writing. Elena's father, she had told me, was a well-to-do businessman, but very greedy. He would have liked to exploit her lovely voice if only he could package it some other way. And Elena's mother had once been a famous vocal artiste of the 1920s, but now had a cancer of the throat, so she wore red scarves around her neck and had become vain and quite mad, bringing scandal upon the family by seeking out the affections of younger men and growing ever more jealous of her daughter's crystalline voice. I wrote to them, and I begged them to allow Elena to sing. They did not respond. I wrote that I loved their daughter. They sent back the letter. I was desperate. I would have tried anything to save Elena. I lied. I wrote that I could help them, that I knew of a way that they could make a profit off this daughter that so mortified me. And they sent for me immediately. Their home in Italy was immense and stark. Before they allowed me to see Elena, they led me to a dark, high chamber and demanded to know my lucrative ideas. I told them I thought Elena should release an album. The mother hissed. "That's the best you can think of? She's repulsive. What could there be on an album cover?" I failed to convince them to release Elena, and the father stormed off, regretting the price of my train ticket. When the door shut, Elena's mother, smelling of stale rose water and talc, pounced on me. I had never been kissed, and she was hungry and old and dying at the time, and you could taste it in her breath. She was old but strong, and she had my trousers down before I could... She felt my smoothness. I waited for her face to fall, for her to be horrified just a little bit. But she was not horrified, and she did not cry out. She only took a closer look, and then tore open my shirt to see my chest, and she asked me, "Can you sing?" Not at all, I told her. She said, good. And then the mother cooked up a plan that delighted the father. There were, in the height of Italian opera, men and boys that played the roles of women and who made their careers by cutting off their testicles in order to reach the highest notes, the most angelic harmonies. These were the castrato. It was 1962, and although the last castrato had died much earlier in the century, Elena's parents thought, just maybe, there might still be a little audience for a man so dedicated to his art, especially one who had Elena's voice. It was a good idea. Elena could finally be heard, and I could be seen. I could do something fantastic, exceptional, tremendous. The parents finally allowed me to see Elena, and she was so elated, so surprised to see me, that it was easy to convince her to agree to our plan. So it was I that brought her downfall, the most cursed and blessed of beings, and she let me tip the scales in favor of the curse. Rehearsals started, and the mother taught me how to form my mouth to the shape of Elena's voice, and to shape myself in cosmetics and gowns, but not too much. I must be still visibly a man. And the father kept Elena hidden in her black box behind thick curtains, her one good eye peeping out at me unseen. And the parents used their connections to arrange a performance, and on the first night, the theater was filled. But those who had come to see a freak show, those who laughed and whispered coarsely at my entrance, soon were quiet. Elena's voice, as if from me, filled the theater. You were beautiful and extraordinary. They wept despite themselves. The illusion was immaculate. Even I began to believe the voice was mine. For me, it was an orgasmic moment. They gave me a standing ovation. The big O, clapping at halftime, their mouths calling out Italian words that flew like thick red roses woven into a blanket for me alone. I was a sensation. Instant, international, unprecedented. We toured Italy, then Europe, performed for a queen in England, and then traveled to America, where the president sat one night in the audience. And Elena and I, under the direction of her parents, improved the illusion until we almost believed it ourselves. I was creating music, or Elena was creating music through me. On stage, we were suddenly one person. It was our way of making love without ever touching. I was happy, and so very busy that I did not notice Elena's unhappiness. Soon, we were broadcast on a live television program to 23 nations worldwide. And then, something awful, unspeakable happened. A young man in Germany heard me. He went to his kitchen and he cut off his penis and his testicles. And he sent them to me in a box as his sacrifice. Then I received another. Then hundreds. Men and boys were cutting themselves off at the root for their art. They wanted to be like me. I was flattered. Elena was disgusted. She told me to send them back. No, I told her, for once, I have balls to spare. And Elena looked at me with her one good eye, and she said, this is what I fear. We are just in the circus. You are a clown. You are a monstrosity. You are a freak. You are vain. You are a fake. Suddenly I was disgusted with her. I could not even look at her. I said, you are the freak. You should be thankful that I hide you. Art must be perfect and beautiful. You are too hideous to be seen. People would vomit. Elena, you are the monster. Don't forget that. I could not stop myself. I was famous. I was invincible. I was receiving 30 penises in the mail a week. I was like a god. I did not notice the look of revenge in her eye. That same night, it was Puccini. We had come back to Paris. The opera was filled. The adoration was palpable. Elena's voice soared. I had forgotten that it was not my voice, that I was only its conduit, its pretty face. I had passion and power and rhythm. The audience was so moved they stood up and clasped their quivering hands to their heads. The freak from America had moved them this deeply. Suddenly they were screaming and pointing behind me. You see, Elena had pulled aside the curtain and wheeled herself out onto the stage. Like a fool, I kept singing. I didn't see her until she was passing me. Then my painted lips froze. The orchestra had stopped. But still singing, Elena rolled herself up to the audience. Still singing, she opened the doors on her big metal box, her small, safe place. And still singing, she slid out onto the floor. The audience fled. I watched them go, thinking, I am ruined. Elena sang until she was out of breath. Her heart and lungs did not work without the machine. Silent at last, she looked at me with her one good eye, and I felt as though I would wash away more liquid than she. Poor Elena, boneless organs on the stage, and still somehow with more backbone than I ever had. I was mortified, and I ran away and hid. Days later, I was told that because nobody was willing to lift her back into her machine, and because she spent long minutes without air. Elena's fragile brain had become damaged. She was lost in unconsciousness. I had ruined us both. And the father sold Elena, silent and useless, to a circus. He would not speak to me. Elena's mother remained unmortified by dying shortly after the incident. Men and boys wrote to me they wanted their penises back, and I hadn't kept them. The newspapers followed me everywhere at first, even to the bathroom. awkwardly all together. And I always thought of Elena. It was my fault that she was in that service. I had to find her. But I was poor. I had no money. A man in Paris saw me drinking. He recognized me and offered me work. He wanted to take pictures. There was an audience, he told me, for everything, even for you. So we went to his gray flat, and I took down my trousers, and he photographed me. And a month later, I performed in an erotic movie. I was poor, I needed the money, and so I let them have me for their film. At least they appreciated my uniqueness. And they let me write my own scripts and compose my own music. I had a great face for film. For the small amount of time the camera stayed on my face. I became well known in that circle. The work was easy and it was nice to be held, but most importantly, it funded my search for Elena. I traveled the world between films for 9 years, until I finally found her in a tiny modern circus in Canada, near Quebec. She was billed as the inside-out woman. It was $2 to see her, and the man at the door of her dingy trailer informed me for 10 I could touch her. I gave him 2. She was shriveled, sunken, dried up, devoid. Her one good eye did not focus on me. The machine kept her breathing, but I had given her over to hell. I stumbled outside and threw up next to the building. The man selling tickets came around to laugh at me. "Dig this, mister, she has a boyfriend." "Who is he?" "Just some average Joe," he told me. "He comes to see her at night." He asked me if I thought that wasn't some really freaky shit. I told him yes, it was very freaky shit. And then I asked him how much the boyfriend paid to see her. $10, he told me. I noticed he kept a bat behind the trailer in case of trouble. It was unholy. I came back at night. I waited behind her metal box. It hummed and clunked, unoiled all this time. The young man came. I don't know what his name was, but he seemed like a Brad, or perhaps a Rick. He looked at her and he told her stories. And then he opened her hydraulic metal doors and he touched her. He put his hand on her. Even I had never touched her before. He told her that he loved her, and Elena, little Elena, nearly melted by this year back to an organic goo, let out one clear note, above and beyond singing, more passionate than... I imagine it was probably an orgasm. How dare she have one of those when I had never had one or given her one? He told her that he loved her, and he touched her. And she sang out, her voice rising until the glass plates on her machine vibrated with her. I had not been a dancer, nor a poet. I did not write nor sing well. I was no genius by any measurement. But to realize that I loved her with only mediocrity and a halfway passion next to this man, this stranger, who walked on 2 legs, had all his parts, and everything that the average Joe has. But he loved her better than I had. And she loved him. Without divine talent or defect, she loved him, and she sang for him, and she orgasmed for him. While I, who was not gifted enough for the world and barely ugly enough for the underworld, was not, in the end, even average enough to be loved. I went out and I took the ticket man's bat. It felt right in my hand. And I beat to death Elena's lover, 12 blows to the head, and I kept beating him until he split open down the middle and surrendered his warm organs across the front of my brown sweater. Three sounds in the trailer. One, blood dripping from the ceiling. Two, my breathing, harsh and even. Three, the labored chugging of Elena's silver box. I saw my reflection in her windows, and I realized how with her lover's organs hanging across me, we looked alike. But it was clear that I was the monster. She stopped singing. And maybe with her once good eyes, she recognized me. She was silent at last. And in revenge, she died. Her breathing stopped. Chugging slowed to a resigned wheeze. Like that night on stage, I was too pitifully weak and afraid to save her. I waited too long to open the doors and to let her slide into my lap. Strangely, touching her made me feel unborn. My mother's warm womb cooling around me, expelling me back into the world, unmothered and cold again, reminding me of everything I'd lost. I poured Elena and her lover into a trash can and fled. Men with no dick should not play with sticks. I was captured and jailed in Quebec. It was worse than the circus. They shut me in a box of my own with great steel doors. Of me, not even my head was exposed. Not unsurprisingly, among the murderers, I felt out of place. Although I had killed a man and ruined countless lives, I was timid and unobtrusive among the brilliant savages here. I wrote to my father, and he sent me a picture of himself with his new wife and 3 cheerful, ruddy teenagers gathered in their arms, my half-siblings. They were all well and healthy. Tony played football. Tanya was a little ballerina. And little Joseph, only 12, was going to be an astronaut. His name was Joseph. My father had reused my name on his new penis-rich son. I waited for my own breathing to stop. I cut off a finger with a sharpened spoon, hoping to bleed to death. Of course, it didn't work. But I did manage to kill my hopes of a late life career in piano. I tried to go mad, but my mind is too even for that convenience. I was left with myself for 25 years in a jail in Canada. Quebec. Hell within hell within hell, the nesting doll of hell. Until Elena forgave me and came to me as a ghost that looked like her mother with her father's hands. She was pretty and whole, hovering over my toilet like a full moon. And she gave me advice from the afterlife. Joseph, stop. Stop this thought that drives your breath, that somewhere there is a list, with each one to X, in order of quality and worth and beauty and potency and size of genitalia and talent. You were the only one with the one gift that no one else could ever have. What, Elena, what is it? I can't tell you. Well, give me a hint. She smiled. No. Figure it out yourself. Elena, yes. Am I forgiven? She blinked, she smiled, and she disappeared. Which meant yes, I think. She could have been the moon shining in and bouncing off the toilet water, but I know she was real. The next day, I discovered I shall be released on this day, today, in a few hours. And so I shall be released, rejected and terrified and pale from my stone box. My punishment, my reward, for being a tidy, exceptionally well-behaved prisoner. And the warden, it turns out, is a fan of my films. In video stores, he tells me I am my own section. It's a strange life. Not completely unlucky, just mostly. When I look back at the strange course of my days, I cannot imagine anyone else having lived them. Anyone else would have messed it up? They would have been a smashing success at the wrong time and never failed on cue. They would have had a penis, or at least balls. But I, Joseph Kind, I am the only train that could have traveled the tracks I made. Yes, that is my talent.